Hello, leader. Welcome back to the Fierce Factor podcast. Thank you for tuning into this episode. It's Kaylee here. And listen, you are in for a big treat today because I recently had the opportunity to have a very entertaining and insightful conversation with an absolute powerhouse who I have so much respect for, the brilliant Lexi Yoo, functional medicine nurse practitioner and owner of Yoo Direct Health in Indiana. I actually became a fangirl of Lexi's from afar when I really started trying to understand more about my health and longevity as I sort of flipped into my 40s. And I eventually crossed paths with Lexi at an aesthetic conference. And I began to follow her on Instagram and then listening to her podcast. And I was just so inspired by her passion and energy and mission, really, to support women like us, to achieve peak performance in their personal and professional lives. And flash forward to today, Lexi has participated in several of our programs at KLC and recently became a Pop Leadership Academy member, while her practice manager is working toward her aesthetic practice leader certification. And really learning more about Lexi's booming business and the inflection point she is in her life, scaling this beautiful 7-figure business, doing it with just complete grace and making it look so easy as a mom and wife. She just really inspired me to have this dynamic conversation to, share her personal experience with transitioning her practice into the aesthetic arena, launching her training academy, and just managing it all like a badass, as a high growth entrepreneur herself. And what's so great about this conversation is Lexi just gets real with us about her perspectives of the direction that the aesthetic industry has gone and is going, a little bit of I think, perspective shift for her coming from more of the functional medicine side in her business and, really spending time to talk about what we need as female entrepreneurs to keep ourselves high functioning, our stress levels at bay, and just sort of some of the nuances of her cool perspective being both a woman who is working to stay healthy and run a thriving business and also a thriving household and, be a really great mom and inspiration to so many, her patients, and I think to many of you included. So without further ado, I'm so excited to share this really great interview with Lexi Yoo. Enjoy. Hi there. Welcome to the Fierce Factor podcast. I'm your host, Kaylee Lindholm. And I think it's time for us women to shift the conversation in business and step into our feminine leadership to do the most iconic work the aesthetic industry has ever seen. Each week, I'll be bringing a powerful dose of strategy, sarcasm, solutions, and sass that will rev up your creativity and ignite your brilliance as you link arms with me along our shared path of personal and professional growth in 20 minutes or less. Let's go. Hello, Lexi. Welcome to the Fierce Factor podcast. I am so excited to have you here. I know we've been talking about, chatting offline and online about all of the things aesthetics and wellness. And I have been of probably many of my, of our interviews that I've had, I've looked especially forward to talking with you really just kind of selfishly because I am so fascinated. And, this year I personally dove into the whole idea of becoming well. I guess it was like when I turned 40, I'm like, woohoo, I'm 40. And then when I turned 41, I'm like, it all went downhill. Yeah. And I know that there's a lot of female entrepreneurs out there and listening to this podcast who are like, Lexi, give me all the deets. I want to hear about, myself, what I should pay attention to. And also women who are running aesthetic businesses that are trying to kind of dip their toe into the wellness side. So I'm really excited for our chat today. Welcome to the podcast.
Yeah, thank you so much. I've been listening to your podcast for quite some time. And I was probably about 10 episodes in where I'm like, man, she just speaks to my soul. I have to know this lady. I feel like she follows me with every day and she's lived the life that I live or helps people living the life that I live. So it's good. I'm super excited, very honored to be a part of your podcast. We got to connect in person finally at Aesthetic Next, which was great. But yeah, absolutely. I can't wait to kind of jump in that you're absolutely right. I do a lot with hormone optimization and, we have this like kind of cadre of women that are like women CEOs, peak performance, and they ain't taking this shit lying down. Like, we're like, no. Like, we're not doing this. So they come in and they're like, tell me all the things. I'll see what I'm willing to do, because that's the hard part. And I know we're going to kind of get into setting boundaries. And that's what I have conversations with my female patients. What are you willing to do? Because you're going to have to do little sacrifices here and there, like going to bed early and doing those things. So yeah, absolutely. So a little bit about me, I know you're going to kind of go through my bio here, but just kind of like fast forward. I've been an NP for 12 years. I'm boarded in pediatrics and family practice. I got into functional medicine about 6 years ago. And it was really interesting because I worked all over, different type internal med and surgery, pediatric surgery, trauma, urgent care, women's health. But what really got me interested into the functional wellness side is I ran a medical weight loss program for a bariatric physician. And what I quickly learned is that you could help people lose weight without surgery. And I thought that was really fascinating by looking at things like their vitamins and their nutraceuticals and their gut health and their thyroid. So anyway, there was an opportunity to go work with a DO. So DO is a doctor of osteopathic medicine. And I feel like they tend to kind of focus a little bit more holistically. I mean, they're still very, very traditional in many ways. But if I say, hey, we're going to put them on some adaptogenic herbs, it's not like I just grew another head in front of them. So there was an opportunity to go work with an internist. And what was great about him is that he kind of just gave me enough freedom to kind of like expand my wings. But I was able to kind of almost simulate what it would be like to be a business owner in his office, which was really cool. He was cash pay. I was very grateful for that opportunity. But as kind of medicine changes, was going through some changes. It was about 5-6 years ago. It was pre-pandemic. He kind of went left and I went right. And it was great. It was honestly, it was kind of scary when it happened, but it was like just the shove that I needed to go into this direction. And I've been so grateful ever since. So I started out on the functional side. I started helping mainly women because a lot of them wanted help with weight loss. And I saw a common theme. We'd look at, I always say the core of what we're good at and what we do are hormones, thyroid, adrenals, gut. Like that is the center of the universe in many of these types of instances. And then what was happening is as I got women feeling good, they liked their husband, they felt sexy again, they were sleeping better, they could remember why they went into the pantry, they could recall people's names.
I was sounding too good to be true right now.
Yeah. I was like making some shit happen for these ladies. I mean, they're just not asking for much. And so then it got into, well, hey, what can I do about my wrinkles or my skin or, this? And I'm like, I damn near reversed your Hashimoto's disease. Like, what more do you want from me? So anyway, I always love a good challenge. I love to learn, love to learn. And so I was like, well, I could probably learn, how to do this. And so, one thing I will say, in bariatrics, there's a certification to be a certified bariatric nurse. We can get our center of excellence. There's all these different kinds of certifications we can get. What I find in aesthetics is that really doesn't exist in to an extent. Like I'll tell you, we have a wonderful nurse injector in our practice. Her name is Carmen. She's like right-hand lady. Like we do this together, and she's an RN, and she's actually right now at iSpan getting her certified aesthetic nurse, her CANS certificate or CANS review course is actually what she's doing. That's like the one thing that exists in this type of industry, which is shocking to me, right? So I think about in functional medicine, we think about evidence-based practice. Like, what do the guidelines say? Okay, there's the guidelines. And I always say, especially when I'm teaching, guidelines are the bare fucking minimum you have to do. Okay. We want to go above that. But what is the bare minimum? And then how do we take it up a notch? And what does the evidence say? Well, what's interesting is in aesthetics, it's not as cut and dry like that, right? And so what I did is I try to like seek out mentors and shadow experiences. And one thing I will say, especially learning from on the functional side, is it is expensive to be smart. And I knew that going into it. Like I you can't expect to, hey, can I meet you for coffee? And then like have someone divulge all their years in training of secrets and time away from their family over coffee. That's not how this works.
Yeah.
So what I did is I actually did a fellowship through the Academy of Anti-Aging in aesthetics. And what's so funny is when I go to conferences in aesthetics, nobody knows that exists. And I'm like, well, it was like the one kind of like, remember we talk about guidelines, the bare thing I could at least show that I knew some shit about aesthetics, right? So that's where I started. And what I will say, from kind of like an outsider coming in, I'm a gain trainer. I've got an academy. So yeah, I've definitely worked my way up. But what I've learned in aesthetics is a lot of great injectors. There's amazing injectors. A lot of them kind of come, I don't want to say they're born out of a physician, but what I mean by that is they work with this plastic surgeon, or they worked in cosmetics or plastics, or wherever, which is great, right? Because then they got to see that and then they kind of made it their own and perfected it, which is great. For me, I wasn't born out of anybody. I had no plastic surgeon or cosmetics showing me the way or learning from their mistakes. So what worked in my favor, though, is I had the trust of all these women who they were down 40 pounds. They like their husband again. Haven't steered them wrong yet, so I'm not about to start.
Yeah,
so I think
buy Christmas trees from you. That it does, right? At this point.
Yeah. And so for me, that was so helpful. And I know you've talked about this on podcasts before, is the halo effect, right? Mm-hmm. Halo effect is, I'm fucking amazing at thyroid and gut and hormones. Well, surely she's got to be a fairly decent injector. And I'm like, no, I'm just starting out here, but that was the great thing, is the pressure to Groupon and do a Botox. It wasn't there. I'm like, hey, you're here. Let's go ahead and try it. And the greatest thing is I saw them all the time for thyroid lab follow-up. So if something didn't go right, or if their like eyebrow was in their shoe, they had to see me anyway. So they couldn't hide. You know what I mean? So like I was always doing follow-up with them. So I got to learn their face. I got to learn their anatomy, or like that dose was not enough, or that dose was too much.
Right.
So that's how I was really able to get into aesthetics, for me, more comfortably than probably most injectors would, only because I had an amazing, and I still have them, amazing group of patients who trust me to literally no end. And like they'll say, hey, I'll be your guinea pig. I don't even know what she wants to do to me, but I'll do it. And so I'm very grateful. I'm very lucky. I have worked very hard, but I will say, I did a lot of training through the aesthetic fellowship. I sought out different shadowing experience, paid shadowing experiences, all these other things to really kind of make me stand out amongst all the noise. Because right now there's a lot of noise in the industry. And so safety, education, and bringing up that experience to be more well-rounded, which has been great.
Yeah, absolutely. So it's so fascinating to me because I feel like, well, this is what you do every day and it's very commonplace and normal for you. I remember coming out of the pandemic and just sort of looking at the industry trends and making the prediction, that like really telling all of our clients like, hey, the global wellness industry is worth $1.4 trillion and with a T, and the people who are willing to invest tens of thousands of dollars a year into their aesthetics are suddenly going to now see their healthcare as a priority, which was a pretty recent shift. So you were kind of really on the cusp. I mean, I would say like, it wasn't normalized to pay cash to see a doctor, right, for your healthcare. It was like, okay, see the doctor when you have to. And I remember we worked right around then with Dr. Stephen Soar. He was the first sort of kind of wellness physician we had worked with. And I remember when someone referred him to me and I looked at his business and I was like, he's like, yeah, I get everybody in for cupping. And then they end up doing like everything with me. And I'm like, cupping? I'm like, what? It was, my mind was just blown on like this whole, he's like, trust me, it works. Like he's got all these things going on. And now,
yoga and cold plunge.
I mean, you name it, right? Yeah. And now we see the adoption, I think in general, for the same reasons you did, right? Of like, I have a clientele of people who trust me. And right, we have clients who have been injecting forever. And then now they're themselves like, oh, I'm menopausal now, or like, perimenopausal. And suddenly I have to pay attention to this. And my clients are so like, how could I potentially help them? So I'm really interested to kind of tap into a little bit of from you personally, the perspective of like, you're definitely high energy. I mean, anybody who's around you, you've, got a booming personality, but you're also, you work out. Like, we know, like, Lexi Yoo is not like late there. I don't see you like chilling out on the couch much. Right. So yeah. And what I also know about you is you run a very sophisticated, complex, in a really great way, dynamic practice with a lot of team members, and it's growing and expanding, and there's a lot of moving parts. And I know from, the business coach world, right side of things and perspective, and also as personally as a female owner, of a business, what that can take from you. So let's talk a little bit about like how, I would say like your personal struggles that you have faced, as a female entrepreneur, as it relates to creating this balance in your life. And it's particularly coming from somebody who knows, right? Like who gets it.
Yeah. Yeah. I will say just to that point, I remember when I left traditional medicine 6 years ago, and I was telling my NP doctor friends, like, oh yeah, I'm going to open up my own practice. I'm not taking insurance. And they're like, are you fucking crazy? I'm like, no, I'm over traditional medicine. There's gotta be a better way. And it's not this. And now looking back, I'm like, yeah, that's pretty good. It's pretty good on this side. So it's interesting, early on, it was just me. And I will say, and this from many a late night text to you, is being an entrepreneur is not for the faint of heart. Mm-hmm. And I think one thing that I guess as we grew and we got bigger, I guess I never saw myself as like the boss, the CEO. And now that we have so many employees, I'm like, I have to step into that role. And like, that is where I'm at this point, which is really hard. It is really, really, really hard. But as far as the balance part of it, it's something that every person is going to struggle with. For me, again, coming from the functional side, sleep, exercise, mindset, nutrition, like these are all things that are key integral parts to wellness, right? And so for me, lifting weights, that's my Prozac, right? So like I have to work out. And so when, I hear my women patients say like, oh, I've got 3 kids or I've got this, I'm like, yeah, I do too. A set of mine are twins. Like I get it. But if it's important to you, you will make it a priority, right? So for me, weightlifting or exercise, however you want to do it. For me, it's weightlifting. It's important, so I make it happen. So guess what? I go to bed earlier so I can get up at 5 a.m. to get to the gym. So that for me is like non-negotiable, right? I always say, when women will say like, oh, I have to get up at 5 a.m., but I go to bed at like 10, 11. I'm like, that's like trying to brush your teeth with Oreos in your mouth. Like it's counterproductive. You're taxing your adrenal glands. Like your adrenals aren't going to like that. And then it's going to elicit a rebound cortisol effect, which is going to be counterproductive. You're literally just taxing the system. You're adding gasoline to a fire. It would actually, so I'll give you an example. I had to stay up a little later yesterday, and like my bedtime normally is like 9 o'clock. The time I looked at the clock, it was like almost 10:30, 10:45, which is way past, like I should already be in REM, and I wear an Oura ring to track the sleep and everything. So I know. And so I said, no, I have to then not work out tomorrow morning because I don't want tomorrow's day to suffer.
Oh, wow. So you prioritize sleep over your
Absolutely. Absolutely. People who don't get good deep REM sleep, it accelerates their aging. It accelerates. There's data and studies to show that, right? So not only that, it makes them more insulin resistant. It dysregulates leptin and ghrelin, which is your hunger and full satiety signals. It causes more insulin resistance. Like sleep is the foundation, like just basic stuff. People come in like, I want the peptides, I want your ozone. I'm like, why don't we just start with some sleep? Yeah. And so I think, especially as women, perimenopausal, the first little hormone to go, unfortunately, is progesterone. And I always say progesterone, it's such a calming hormone. I call it nature's Valium. It acts on the GABA receptors of the brain, which is why we take it at bedtime. And it allows us to get into that deep REM sleep. So one of the very first hormones I start replacing in women as young as 30. And the reason why I would say, oh my God, we're in like a progesterone epidemic is because our soil is deficient of magnesium. We need magnesium as an essential nutrient to produce progesterone. And so we don't make progesterone, right? So we see more irregular periods, heavy periods, weird periods, and we don't sleep, and we're bitchy a week before our period. All symptoms of progesterone deficiency. Then we really start to see after 35 night sweats. Night sweats. Those are all progesterone issues. So to make a long story short, sleep is important. Exercise is important. The nutrition type stuff is important. I know that a lot of my patients, my women entrepreneurs, my women like strong ladies, they come in and they relax with wine. And if their goal is weight loss, I tell them like, hey, I understand why you need to do that, to wind down or things like that. But here's the problem. Your body has to metabolize that out. And if your liver is tied up metabolizing the fermentable sugars with wine, all those things, guess what it's not metabolizing? Estrogen. So then we start to see more fibrocystic breasts, heavy menstrual cycles, uterine fibroids, weight gain around the midsection, headaches, acne, all these other things. It's all related. And so just the core basic stuff, like literally not groundbreaking shit yet, just basic stuff.
Well, it's funny because, I thought sleep, I'm like, okay, now it's the sleep fad. Like, remember when like Brussels sprouts became like not just on your grandma's plate and kale became not just the garnish. And then, you have these sort of fads and I'm like, oh, it's sleep. Like sleep has been around since the beginning of time. Why are we just talking about it now? Is it the biohacking tools? Like, like I have this 8 sleep pad, and it, when it gives me a low sleep score, I just am like, I'm all day. I can't even look at it till the end of the next day. Cause I'm like, I don't want to know if I slept good or not, Yeah. So I don't know. Yeah. The other thing too, I did like I'm a wine down with wine girl. And I took the month of October. We're at the end of October now, but I took the month of October off of drinking just to see like a sober October to see like how, anyway, I lost over 2 pounds, just kind of doing the same, routine as normal. But also I think I was able to probably sleep better and probably go harder in my workouts because of it, so
exactly.
Yeah, I was actually pleasantly surprised. And I think I had to learn how to wind down my brain for a month, like learn some new habits. So it's been good. So I want to ask you this question, and I don't know. I don't know if this is kind of controversial or like, I guess when I think about, we talk about high performing women, and the reality is I have conversations with my girlfriends all the time. And of course, like a lot of the friends I hang out with are, I have similar lifestyles, right? And are, either breadwinners or are, big contributors financially to the household, probably have a family at home, have, our motherly instincts and responsibilities don't go away because we run a business. They're still there, whether we, admit it or not. But I'm curious if we high achieving women are more susceptible to illness or hormonal issues. I feel like there's conversations about I've worked with many clients who have driven themselves to the point of I have I'm sick and I have to take in the hospital sick. I have to take time off of the business because I have run myself ragged. I'm curious from your, medical perspective, if we really are, if we need to be a lot more conscientious as high achievers about that and where we're headed.
Yeah, absolutely. So one of the biggest things that I see is that the stress and the pressure and the demanding schedules of being everything at the office to everybody, then getting home and having to do all those things because that's what we as women do. It can create cortisol dysregulation. It can create HPA axis dysfunction. It can also weaken your immune system. If we're not eating good, our gut will suffer. Think about, I can't tell you how many patients I had black coffee or I had a latte for breakfast. I had a protein bar for lunch. And then, I don't know, insert whatever other processed crap they were eating. And I'm like, so, 80% of your serotonin in your immune system is actually made in your gut. If you don't treat your gut right, everything else is not going to work, right? And so it is extremely important because if our eating patterns are dysregulated, it's going to create a sugar dysregulation, which is going to make us rebound and irritable and all kinds of stuff. But our immune system, it's going to weaken our immune system the more stressed and more ragged we are. I can't tell you how many accountant patients I have that get flu, sinus infection, strep during tax season because they're stressed, right? And so, absolutely, absolutely. So some of the things that I would recommend to these types of practitioners or to these types of, business owners, CEOs is, the basic stuff is vitamin C, vitamin D. Vitamin D is always my staff make fun of me because I'm like, when in doubt, just use some vitamin D. Because it's a pro-hormone. It helps your body make its own hormone. It also supports the immune system. It helps with insulin dysregulation. As females, it also helps promote strengthening your bones. It helps in so many ways. Other things, like I was saying, is adaptogenic herbs can be really helpful. So adaptogenic herbs are things like ashwagandha and rhodiola and euthero. I would use them under the care of and guidance of somebody who knows about them, because they can have, some side effects if you're not on the right one. And then the other thing is screen time. I know that's really, really hard. Like I struggle with that too, which is like I had just taken these off because I was looking at a screen and I got my Where's Waldo blue light glasses because the screen affects the pineal gland in the brain, which can suppress melatonin. And so that's why people, if you look at your screen right up until you go to bed, you might have trouble sleeping is because of the melatonin dysregulation. So absolutely. It has the immune system, your nutrition patterns, the way that you are resilient throughout the day, the way that you handle stress. The other thing is your mental health. Like my therapist, she made me do this questionnaire on how healthy are you in all aspects of life? Scored off the chart: sleep, nutrition, exercise, mental health, in the freaking toilet, right? And she's like, yep, you scored just as I thought you would. And so yeah, it's one of those things. It's not just one thing. It's a, little plethora of things.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, it's all interconnected. It reminds me too, when we work with owners, we ask them to rate, how would you rate yourself in all these areas? And it's usually love for your business, 10 out of 10, team, 8 or 9, 10 out of 10, work-life balance, 3 or 1, and the reality is as much as we want to be successful in our business, if we're not healthy and have a, stable home life to support us, it's that there will be mental health issues, period. End of story. It's all connected, If I had one tip to many of these female CEOs, entrepreneurs, is build the infrastructure around you to support the things you want to do. And I can't tell you how many times my female patients come in, they're like, I don't know how you do it. Right. I'm like, well, number one, social media, I will only show you what I want you to see. Right. Yeah. Second thing is that what you don't see is the house manager that I have who does my laundry and, all these other things, my house cleaners who come every 2 weeks, my personal assistant who does this, that, and the other for me. We have a general manager. We have a practice manager. I've got layers and then my wonderful husband who picks up all the pieces for, anything else that needs to be figured out. So that's the only way. You can't do it by yourself. And if you think you can, you're going to burn yourself out real quick. Yeah, I can't. I just want to reemphasize that for you listeners here, because you heard it from, the expert and also someone who's walking the walk. So many times, Lexi, I'm talking to someone about the business is thriving, blah, 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 blah. But they will invest and take risks and go all in and double down and be Beyonce, queen of the business. And then they go home and they're folding underwear. And, it's you have to get help. I'm schlepping the kids here and I'm making every meal. And it's interesting to me how we as women are so quick to invest in our business, but not into our life, to get the help. And it's almost, I think, just that internal feeling of maybe guilt, or I should be doing all of that, or I don't know if it's a patriarchal thing that I should be doing that as a woman, or not having the support, at home, or taking that. And I think a lot of that's just when you talked about boundaries, I think that's one of the key pieces is setting yourself, getting clear about what it is that you're going to need to achieve your goals, and then actually going in and, resourcing that.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Absolutely.
So no, I love all of that. Let's talk a little bit about your experience, as, an integrative wellness physician, and I know you go do A4M and all of that, and you have like that sort of like the medical side, and then sort of transitioning into aesthetics. And then now this whole like past year of this whole boom with semaglutide, and the whole weight loss thing. And, I've literally walked in and seen this in practices. It's the get skinny shot, and it's just, and look, like, I totally get it. Like, I'm not providing an opinion of whether people should or shouldn't or whatever, but more of just, your thoughts about this sort of like trend that's been going on and how it's being distributed and also marketed in the aesthetic industry.
Yeah. That's a very tough question for a lot of reasons. I guess what I will say is, kind of like I said, I worked in weight loss. I worked in bariatrics. So like, I understand, adiponectin and leptin and ghrelin and this and that. And while, with peptides in particular, peptides have been around for a very long time. Insulin was the first peptide that was ever discovered, which has been around forever, right? I've been using peptides in patients for the last 5-6 years. In our area, one of the very first adopters to it, which is great. Way before semaglutide ever came along. Many days I wish semaglutide would go away. I do. For a lot of reasons. What I would say is I think it's a very exciting time. I think it'll be a very interesting time. Just as you and I were supposed to record last week, and there's some peptide changes, and I'm like, Kaylee, I can't get on right now because I have a little bit of a crisis to deal with. Which happens, right? You know that from running businesses. It's going to be very interesting because there are some reclassifications with peptides that are going to be taking place. And I guess the biggest thing that I would say is that if you're going to add in a peptide program, whether it be any GLP-1, semaglutide, tirzepatide, anything like that, either have a practitioner, someone that is dedicated to actually monitoring those patients, invest in a really good body composition analysis system. It didn't have to be anything crazy. Like, we have an in-body, but it didn't even have to be that high tech. Because one of the biggest things that I just want to be sure is I don't want all of us to get a bad rap. You know what I mean? And it's like in every profession we all have, it's like, oh yeah, there's that one teacher or that one police officer. Like, I just want to make sure that we're all doing it safely and that we're all doing what's right for the patient and not just for the business's pocketbook. And I think that's the biggest thing is that baseline blood work. What's the follow-up? Are you coming in? Are they meeting with a nutritionist, a health coach, a dietitian? I will tell you, Kaylee, I sat in on some of those semaglutide programs and at some of the conferences lately. And I'm just like, oh boy, here we are. So I just want to make sure that we're doing it safe and we're doing it for the right reasons. And that these programs, they'll say, I have a weight loss program. And I'm like, you prescribe semaglutide. Like, do you have a health coach? Do they meet with a nutritionist? Are you checking blood work? I just want people to do it the right way. Just do it the right way. So the great thing is there are many good training programs. There's A4M, there's International Peptide Society, there's SSRP, which is a great one. I have, kind of like the Reader's Digest version of that, right. So it's like, how do I take this and implement it Monday morning? So there's lots. I think, again, it's expensive to be smart and you have to invest in these things or refer out, maybe collaborate with an integrative provider who wants, to collaborate with you as an aesthetic and wellness practice. I think that's probably one of the best things you could do. If you're mentally not going to be that person who is going to follow up on those patients and you're not going to hire someone to do it, collaborate with another person who will. And that way you guys can kind of share back and forth these patients and do what's right for the patient. But it's an exciting time. We'll see what happens. There is something that is in the works currently that is better than tirzepatide, which I can't wait to see what that is going to do for the weight loss population. But that's kind of it. Just, I'm very cautiously optimistic. I just want to make sure if people are doing it the right way.
Right. Well, that's what I've heard some of the same feedback from our clients who are in a similar type of business as you, or, really like have a more of an integrative approach to how their patient care and, how the weight loss is there should be a program and, definitely certain level of management around that. I am curious though, your perspective or opinion about why is there so much controversy around peptides with the FDA right now?
I think there's a couple different things. I think for a long time, it's we've been prescribing them from FDA. The sourcing where they come from are FDA inspected, approved facilities, but the compounds themselves are not considered FDA approved. I truly don't know the reason why. I am curious is because now semaglutide has kind of taken peptides to market, like that one peptide. Like I was doing a gain training at a med spa, and I said, "Oh, you guys prescribe semaglutide?" And they said, "Oh yeah." And I said, "Do you guys use any other peptides?" And she looked at me. She goes, "Well, what else is there?" And I was like, yeah. I was like, there's a couple more, but I was just curious, And so I think that's part of it. I think is because there are so many more people prescribing semaglutide and touting peptides. And I can't tell you that there's one thing that happened. I don't know that. But I think semaglutide brought it to market and put it on the radar. And now the rest of us got to suffer.
Yeah. One of our clients, and actually she's working with me through some of my wellness stuff, Dr. Lori Gerber in Philadelphia. And she said her opinion is this is just big pharma politics. It's like she's like the lives that I have changed, having these peptides, she said have been around since like in hundreds of years. She was talking about like how bootleg
insulin forever.
She's like, this happened like in way before the Industrial Revolution. Like, she's like, this is not new. This is now big pharma sees, this package coming like this, and probably to your point, the semaglutide. And now they want, well, hey, there's not regulation here, and we need to be in the game. And, which again, who's disadvantaged? The patient.
Right.
At the end of the day.
What I will say, as someone who does study peptides and have done some certifications, and I'm actually kind of excited about it. Yes, it sucks, but I actually am looking at this as an opportunity, because in one of the mastermind groups that I belong in with many peptide physicians and practitioners, is they're actually hoping to make a board certification in peptide therapy. Mm-hmm. So you have to be certified to prescribe them. Which I'm like, you know what? This is going to, I think, help streamline it. Remember I said like in aesthetics, I'm like, there's really not like a set, like this is exciting. This is like, oh, okay. So yes, it does suck, but I think for the long term, I think it'll actually be good.
Yeah. So let's say like peptides aside, as we talked about industry trends and where, our global economy is, and the industry forecast of aesthetics growing at an unprecedented clip, and really where the wellness industry is. And we're seeing, at rapid pace, the integration of two. I know our work with our clients, they're one and the same now. Like it's aesthetic wellness practice owners, that we're working with. So that being said, from your perspective, does it make sense for every medical aesthetics provider or practice owner to be offering wellness services in their practice?
That's a great question. While we were away last week in Destin, I'm sure you've read, I'm sure, you've seen it, there was that adverse event that happened at a med spa, and there's some more details about it. And, I'm not here to be like, the news reporter, but that's my fear. That's my fear, because then, the local docs here see about that and they're like, oh, I know that UDirect Health, they do some IVs too. I'm like, whoa. Don't lump me with them. Like I check labs on all my patients. I'm monitoring their labs way more often than probably most people are. So that's where I'm like, ugh, so here, no, I don't think everybody should be doing it. And if you do want to do it, I think you need to go through proper training. And I think you need to have an allocated practitioner with a prescriptive license who will monitor those patients, not the ER doc who's 2 counties away and just collecting their medical director paycheck, or their, the anesthesiologist who is dabbling in it for whatever the reason. Practitioner needs to be in the house.
Yeah. It's interesting because we talk, as you and I mentioned sort of offline, like some of your first impressions coming into the aesthetic industry and looking for like, where's the regulations? Where's the formula? Where's the certifications? Like, how do I know where, like, where's the frameworks?
Right.
And so I've had conversations, and even on this podcast, for example, with Leslie Fletcher, talking about like the Wild West of aesthetics. And, I'm seeing very similar trends happening in the sense that we'll see, injectors who are quite experienced that are like, we have to train and teach the next generation how to do it properly, or it's going to impact our entire industry altogether, and it's going to impact us. And I remember speaking of Aesthetic Next several years ago, talking with Tiffany Hall, and she was saying, the thing for me, and I think she said this on the Fierce Factor podcast, is that all these original conferences were built by there's core or non-core physicians. Mm-hmm. So you had your derms and plastics, and then that's who should be talking about aesthetics. And then you have all these injectors that are coming out of their practices, out of the hospital, wanting to inject, and there isn't anybody teaching them. And she said, here's the thing, like, if we don't teach them, then all these core physicians are going to be the ones that are going to be impacted. So we need to open up, and that was sort of the impetus for Aesthetic Next. So I see some of these same sort of trends happening here, like on the wellness side as well, where is there a Wild West a little bit, is it, the reality, we have to be careful. And I think that I don't want to say the risks, or the potential adverse issues could be worse, but kind of, because when you're talking about somebody's like endocrine system, right? Or like, I think that could have been a freak accident too, what happened in Texas. But the reality is there were protocols that were not followed, right?
Right.
Right. Yeah. So interesting. So let's talk about sort of your academy and, how you, I clearly there was a gap that we've already talked about, and how you decided like, okay, now I need to bring this in as a part of my practice and offering, and bring my expertise so that I can fill this and provide the sort of Reader's Digest version of how to integrate wellness into your practice. So tell us a little bit about your academy and who's the right sort of client.
Yeah. So I started last year, it was called the integrative residency. So I started it locally because my husband called, it was like the rise of the NP, right? So there's a lot of NPs that saw me and they're like, oh, she's doing this and it's working. And she's growing.
Your husband called you the
rise of the NP, what is that movie with Katniss Everdeen? And she's like, you volunteered as tribute. I'm like, well, great. But it was like, and yes. But it was, NPs reaching out like, hey, can I shadow you? Like, where do I go? Where do I take this training? And so, there was enough people asking that I'm like, maybe we do like a once a month call. Let's start there. Mm-hmm. So I'd start, but what was hard is like, we'd start picking up people and everyone was like in a different phase of like, oh yeah, we already covered thyroid. Your patient's got candida. Okay, well, I guess let's talk about that today. So it was just not organized. It was just like all over the place. Yeah. And then what would happen is then I'd start getting asked by NPs, not local, like out of my state. So then finally, we got to the point where I'm like, well, maybe we just need to like actually structure this. And so we switched it. I recorded it all throughout the early part of this year. We call it YDH Academy. And we call it from classroom to clinic. And what I like about this compared to many of the other programs I've taken is that while the knowledge, the cellular medicine, the foundations, extremely important to be an expert, none of it shows you like, how do I treat this patient Monday morning? How do I bundle this? How do I price it? What do I need to write in the consent? What do I need to chart? Who's the supplier for that? Like, how do I order that in the computer? All the little nitty gritty details that they don't teach you at those classes. So that's kind of what I did is I put all the stuff together and I made 6 modules. And it's like, we talk about core or plastics and derm. Core would be thyroid, hormones, women's health, men's health, peptide therapy. And I did make an aesthetics module because there are some really cool things that I do with aesthetics that no one around here does, using ozone therapy, using an ultrasound machine, using peptides, doing all kinds of different things. And so that's kind of where the aesthetic people who I've been injecting 20 years, that's the module that they take. And it's usually the last 2 lectures. So it's all virtual. With the module that they purchase, they can watch it as many times as they want. And it's good for 6 months if they just buy the module. And then they get a free 4-hour shadow. And I feel like that's what really, in my opinion, sets my program apart from many others, is because then you can come on site and you tell me like, Lexi, I want to see thyroid and I want to see how you manage this. And I can show you like, all right, come on, let me show you how the EMR looks. Let me show you how I prescribe this. Then you can really see the minutia of, oh, that's how it's done. And I feel like that's what we lack in the education program, is that how do I actually do this?
Yeah. Practical, actionable.
Practical. Yeah.
And because you've been through it, like this is what was missing.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. And so we have these, 6 modules. And the other thing that I think is actually more popular than the module itself is the monthly membership. So, I believe the cost is $99 a month. And what they get access to is what I call all the clinical updates. So I'm telling you what, the members are just getting all kinds of information because of all the changes that are happening with peptides. And so what I'm providing them is, okay, this was the peptide that's now going away. This is now our swap out. This is the supplier. This is their price. This is the discounted rate that I've gotten for our program. Here you go. So I'm like doing kind of like all the legwork, and they're just like, all right. So the way that I treat them my academy members, as if they're my NPs that work with me on site, except they're just at their office. Right. So they get all the clinical updates. They're like, hey, we're doing a protocol change in our office. I'm going to tell you what it is, and here's why I did it. So I did a whole social media, like how to turn content into Canva, just to show them how to do that. I went through, they're like, we did an ozone one. There's all kinds of stuff that we do. Every month they get a call, and then they get access to a closed Facebook group where they can kind of drop questions like, hey, what compound pharmacy has this? Because such and such is out. And then like, it's a community. It's like, you've got Fierce Factor. It's creating a small community of like-minded individuals that are all in the same boat.
Yes. Yeah, exactly. Okay. So my kind of final question for you. So you mentioned a couple times, you said it's expensive to be smart. And when we opened up, you had talked about, and I've been there on both sides, honestly, because I think when I first started out and I was like, oh, I need a mentor. And I remember emailing someone and being like, hey, will you mentor me? Not like knowing what that even meant. And now, I'm 15 years in and people call me all the time to like pick my brain, and it's like, well, do you know how much people pay to pick my brain? So I get that, right? Like just to have a cup of coffee. But like when you get to a point where you are of a certain level of experience, it's that you have spent years, mastery, out 10,000 hours at doing your craft, learning, perfecting, polishing your craft, doing it wrong, failing, picking up, doing it again. Like it is, and then here you put it into a book, right? For everybody, like here you go. And we talk about the value of like, for me as a service provider, the same thing. Like, how do you price services when this could be $1 million business model plus, right? For somebody coming in to do that. And I know you and I have had conversations about just some of our shared frustrations about like, how come some people can see that and some people don't? So I'm curious if that was sort of where that phrase is coming from, or if that means something else, something different for you, that it's expensive to be smart. I'm curious what that means for you.
Yeah, I definitely agree. Like I said, I think that it's almost like, I don't know if it's like naiveness, like people don't realize the time and the effort it took us to get to this position. But not only financial though, Kaylee, I'm thinking the nights that I, put my kids down and immediately I'm like, okay, I got to go open my laptop, or like, yeah, hey, I'm sitting there while my kid's watching a movie, but I'm not watching because I'm doing this. It's the sacrifice from time away from your family, time away from your kids, time away from your friends, all these other things, that it's the expense you pay. It's the expense you pay, right? Now, yes, it does pay off, but at the same time, why should I just give that away? And so I think financially, yes, it's expensive to be smart when it comes to academics and fellowship and conferences and the travel. And, I'll give you a great example. So one of my mentors, and, she's actually become a very good friend of mine. She lives in Georgia. She's a physician. I had reached out to her a couple months ago and I said, hey, I'm taking on a cancer case, a Parkinson's case, a chronic tremor case that neurology can't figure out. Like, this is some crazy shit. Okay. And so, hey, I want to buy your $6,000 mentorship for 6 months. And she says, no, you don't have to buy it. And I said, no, Suzanne, I want to buy it because I know the time and energy that it takes to teach someone and devote time to someone, and you need to be compensated for that. And she was like, oh, thank you so much. So then we had dinner in Chicago at a conference, and she's like, you really didn't have to do that. I go, yes, I did, because you also need to see the value in what you bring to the table. Mm-hmm. And so she's my mentor, but I'm like, hey, you're smart as shit. Like,
that's a great, I love that relationship, because I think that there should be a given, an exchange of value in all of the ways, right? If you want to have a productive and valuable relationship with somebody, right? It shouldn't just be a one-way thing.
And I am respecting her time. I'm respecting her time, and I think that's what it shows.
Yes. And I think not enough, like, even, right, maybe you don't have an academy, but even for like our business owners listening, and I will say ad nauseum, I think everybody's underpricing themselves, around here, but that it starts with us, right? It starts with like that mindset that, hey, I'm standing behind the work. I know that I'm world class, and like what I'm going to deliver is going to provide such a transformational result to somebody that I'm going to make sure that I price my services in a way that they understand and know that, and game knows game, like we've had this conversation, like people who have done it and walked the walk, they don't want freebies. They want to respect and, give mutual value for sure. So yeah, very true. And I'm thinking as you're like, it's expensive to be smart. And I'm thinking of like the stacks of books I have in my bookshelf. And I'm like, the money I spent on those books, but the time that I didn't spend doing something else that could make me money to like put my nose in that book and learn. So I love that. That's such a great little phrase. So Lexi, it's been amazing. Thank you for all of the
absolutely.
Yeah, all the great insights. So I guess I would love for you to just, is there, share any how, if anybody's interested in getting in touch, with your academy.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So if anyone is interested in checking out our academy, it's www.ydhacademy.com. We have an Instagram handle, ydh_academy. I post a lot of my kind of education. So if you're a practitioner getting into this and you want something to follow on Instagram, I learned a shit ton from Kaylee on her Instagram. It's Uterex Health _aesthetics. And it's like, all kinds of fun stuff, theme, OSHA, wing lift, thyroid Thursday, all kinds of stuff. I also have a podcast, The Better You Project, and that's kind of geared more towards patients. So, as a practitioner, if you're interested in getting on this side of medicine, it might just be good to kind of just start there, and that's, free. But yeah, happy to have, email, conversation, all that stuff. But most of the information is on the academy.
Love that. All right, Lexi. Well, thank you so much for your time, and appreciate you. Take care.
Thank you so much.
All right. Bye-bye. Listen, leader, if you're vibing with me here, hang tight, because I have a brand new resource for you. You are a successful, confident, powerful woman who just isn't into being average. No, you have a calling, and part of that calling is requiring you to level up. And I know that if you're working to cross the next $1 million milestone in your business, you need to be in the right circles. And perhaps that's why you found us. I'd love to invite you to join The Blueprint, a weekly resource for inspired, provocative thinkers who are taking this conversation to the next level. Get access to free business tools, podcast supplements, guideposts, and direct communication with me and my expert team. And of course, a masterfully curated circle of women making big moves and disrupting the status quo in aesthetics and wellness. You can link directly through the show notes or head to klcconsultants.com/blueprint. It's time to elevate. See you there, goddess.